AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she kicked me out of her house years ago. I, 28M, have a younger sister, Emily, 24F, who I've had a pretty complicated relationship with over the years. Growing up, we were close, but things started to shift when we got older. Emily always had a bit of a better-than-you attitude, which rubbed me the wrong way, but I tried not to let it bother me too much. We had our occasional arguments, but nothing that seemed worth making a big deal out of. However, when I was 22 and just starting out in my career, I was in a really bad spot financially. I had just moved out of my parents' house and into a cheap apartment, but the rent was a stretch, and I ended up falling behind. I didn't want to ask my parents for help because I didn't want them to think I couldn't manage on my own, so I turned to Emily, hoping she'd be willing to lend me a hand. At the time, Emily had a nice apartment of her own, and she'd recently started her career, so I figured she was in a much better position than I was. I asked if I could crash on her couch for a few weeks while I figured things out. I told her I'd pay her rent, and I promised it would only be temporary. She hesitated for a bit, but agreed, although she made it clear that I'd need to respect her space and rules while I was there. Things started off okay, but within a few days, the tension between us became pretty obvious. Emily is very particular about her living space, and I didn't always meet her standards. I'm not a slob by any means, but I wasn't as obsessive about cleanliness as she is. I'd leave a dish out for a little too long, or forget to make the bed, and she'd make passive-aggressive comments about it. I tried to be as considerate as I could, but it felt like nothing was ever good enough for her. A few weeks into my stay, I was still struggling to find a more permanent place to live, and I was starting to get really stressed. One night, I'd had a rough day at work, and I came home and accidentally knocked over a vase that she really liked. I apologized profusely and offered to replace it, but Emily completely flipped out. She started yelling at me, saying I was disrespectful and that I'd ruined the atmosphere in her home. She told me I needed to get my act together and stop being such a burden on her. At that point, I was really fed up. I hadn't asked her for much. I was paying her rent, I was doing my best to be considerate, and I was just trying to make it through a tough time. But it seemed like every little mistake I made was being blown out of proportion. I tried to explain how I was feeling, but she wasn't having it. In the middle of our argument, she said, "If you're going to be this much of a headache, just leave." That was the last straw for me. I felt completely humiliated and betrayed. I packed up my things that night and left. I went back to my parents' house, feeling like I'd been kicked out by my own sister for a mistake that was honestly an accident. After that, I pretty much cut contact with her. I didn't want anything to do with someone who could treat me that way, especially after I had been there for her when she needed help in the past. Fast forward to today. Over the past few years, I've been able to build up my career and stabilize my finances. I moved into a nice place, and my life has generally been going well. Recently, Emily reached out to me out of the blue, asking if she could stay with me for a while. She explained that she's been having a rough time with her living situation. She broke up with her boyfriend, and she's now facing some financial difficulties because she lost her job. She apologized for the way things went down when I stayed with her, saying she was young and didn't handle the situation well. I didn't know how to respond at first. On one hand, I could empathize with what she's going through. I've had tough times too, and I know what it's like to need help. But on the other hand, I still haven't fully gotten over the way she treated me. It really hurt when she kicked me out, and I've spent years not wanting to interact with her because of how she made me feel. I told her that I wasn't sure I could let her stay with me. I explained that I didn't want to go through the same experience all over again, especially if things went south between us like last time. I didn't want to risk having my space and peace disturbed, especially after everything I went through to get to where I am now. She got really upset and accused me of holding a grudge, saying that family is supposed to be there for each other, and I was being selfish for not helping her out when she needed it. She even brought up how I had suffered when I didn't have anywhere to live, suggesting that I should be more understanding of her situation. Since then, I've been feeling really torn. I know it's not exactly fair to refuse her help just because of something that happened years ago, but at the same time, I don't want to risk my mental health or let myself be walked over again. I've worked really hard to get to where I am, and I don't want to invite unnecessary drama back into my life. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after the way she treated me in the past. Or should I just let it go and help her out? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for telling my friend that her dream career is actually a huge mistake. I, 29F, have a close friend, Sarah, 28F, who has always had a pretty clear vision of what she wants in life. We met in college and hit it off right away, bonding over shared interests in art, literature, and ambition. We've been thick as thieves ever since, even after graduation when we both went off in different career directions. But lately, things have gotten a bit more complicated, and I'm honestly not sure if I'm the asshole or not. Here's the deal. Sarah has always dreamed of being a professional photographer. She got into it as a hobby during high school and really started to hone her skills in college. I always thought her work was decent, but I also wasn't blind to the fact that it was far from extraordinary. Still, she kept pushing forward. She even took out loans to attend a prestigious photography school, even though I warned her about the financial risks involved. She's been working as a freelance photographer for about 3 years now. And to be fair, she has had some small successes here and there. She's done a few wedding shoots, some portraits for local businesses, and even got a couple of gigs for fashion brands that were looking for someone with a fresh eye. But here's the thing. She's not really making enough money to sustain herself. She's constantly stressed, working 60-plus hour weeks to scrape by, and living off ramen noodles because she can't afford rent in a decent apartment. I don't know how to say this without sounding harsh, but I think she's wasting her time. It's not that I don't appreciate art or photography. I do. But I can't ignore the fact that the photography market is oversaturated, and the reality is that the majority of photographers struggle to make a living, especially if they don't have a clear niche or unique style. Sarah's work isn't groundbreaking, and while she's talented, she's not on the level of someone who can charge top dollar for their services. Her portfolio is good, but not exceptional, and it's not enough to justify the financial strain she's putting herself under. I've tried to gently nudge her towards something more stable, something that would let her pay her bills without feeling like she's drowning every month. I've suggested she consider a side job in marketing or even work as an assistant for a bigger photography studio. I've also told her more than once that maybe it's time to take a step back and think about what she really wants out of life, because it's clear that her dream isn't as glamorous as she envisioned. But she always brushes me off, saying that she's not going to give up on her dream and that successful people don't quit when it gets tough. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we were out at a bar with a few other friends, and the topic of careers came up. Sarah was talking about how her latest gig, photographing a local music festival, didn't pay as much as she had hoped, and she was feeling frustrated. I, in my infinite wisdom, tried to offer her some advice. I told her, in a more blunt way than I probably should have, that maybe it was time to consider that photography might not be the right career for her. I said that it's okay to admit when something isn't working, and that she could pivot into something else that would give her more financial security and a less stressful life. I told her that she could still do photography on the side as a hobby, but she needed to face the reality that being a full-time photographer might not be sustainable in the long run. She was furious. She snapped back at me, telling me I was unsupportive and lacked vision. She accused me of being a typical pessimist who only thinks about practical stuff and doesn't understand the value of following your passion. Our other friends were silent, and the atmosphere in the group got really awkward. The conversation ended quickly, and Sarah didn't talk to me for the rest of the night. When we left, she shot me a text saying, "You don't get it, but I'll show you someday. Don't expect me to waste any more time with you if you're just going to tear me down." I feel terrible about it. I genuinely didn't mean to hurt her feelings, but I also can't shake the feeling that she's setting herself up for failure. I'm worried she's going to be stuck in this endless loop of barely making ends meet and convincing herself that it's worth it because it's her dream. I understand that everyone has their own path, but when I think about her financial situation and how much stress she's under, I wonder if she's being delusional. I've always been the kind of person who wants to see my friends succeed, and sometimes that means offering advice that's tough to hear. I don't think I'm wrong for pointing out the reality of her situation, but now I'm questioning if I overstepped. It feels like I've ruined our friendship over something that might not have even been my place to say. So, Reddit, AITA for telling my friend that her dream career in photography is a huge mistake. Edit, I see a lot of comments suggesting I should have been more tactful or less direct. Honestly, I wasn't trying to be cruel, but sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who's willing to be real with her. I love Sarah, and I just want her to be happy and financially stable. She's in serious debt, and it's stressing me out. But I understand that people react differently to criticism, and maybe I should have handled it better. Still, I just don't know how to balance being supportive without enabling her to keep struggling for something that's only making her more miserable. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's living expenses after she moved in with me and my husband. So I, 28F, have a younger sister, Mia, 24F. Mia has always been a bit irresponsible and has a history of jumping from one situation to another without really thinking things through. She's a very emotional person, and it seems like every time something doesn't go her way, she panics and doesn't know how to handle it. I've always been the more stable one in the family, and while I love my sister, I've had to bail her out a few times over the years, especially financially. A couple of months ago, Mia was living in a small apartment and was having serious trouble paying the rent. She told me that she couldn't make her rent and was looking for a roommate. I tried to offer her some advice, but as usual, she didn't want to listen to me. A few days later, she called me up in a panic and said that she was being kicked out and didn't have anywhere to go. I offered to help her out, but only on the condition that she would contribute to the household expenses and help out with chores. My husband, Eric, 30M, and I have always maintained a fair split of responsibilities when it comes to finances and housework, and I didn't want that to change. Mia reluctantly agreed to move in with us. At first, things were fine. She would help out with a few chores here and there, and she started looking for a new apartment. But as the weeks went by, I started noticing that she wasn't really following through with the promises. She barely helped with cleaning, and it felt like I was doing the majority of the household work. It got worse when Eric and I went on a weekend trip, and I came home to find that the house was an absolute mess. There were dirty dishes everywhere, garbage piled up in the kitchen, and her room was a disaster. I was frustrated, but I didn't want to confront her just yet because I figured she would get the picture soon enough. But then, things took a turn. A few weeks ago, Mia mentioned that she wasn't going to be able to contribute to the rent because she didn't have enough money. She said she had been looking for jobs, but nothing was panning out. I was upset, but tried to be understanding. I told her that if she couldn't help pay the rent, she would need to contribute in other ways, like doing more housework and cooking. I told her I couldn't afford to carry all the financial responsibility for the household. That's when the tension really started to build up. Mia started making excuses for everything. I don't have time to clean because I'm busy looking for work. I'm too tired to cook. I had a rough day. When I asked her about contributing to the rent, she told me that she didn't feel like she should have to because she was doing me a favor by living with us and that she didn't have any extra money. This left me incredibly frustrated because she had already agreed to pay her part of the rent when she moved in. I tried to talk to her about it calmly, but she just became defensive and kept saying she was trying her best, even though it was clear that she wasn't. Finally, after weeks of this back and forth, I reached my breaking point. I told her that if she couldn't help out financially or contribute to the household, she would have to move out. I explained that I was tired of carrying the weight of the housework and finances alone, and it wasn't fair to me or Eric. She didn't take it well. She started crying, accusing me of being a terrible sister and selfish for not helping her out more. She said that I was kicking her out when she had nowhere else to go, and I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. I felt guilty, but also incredibly frustrated. I'm already working full-time and trying to maintain a healthy relationship with my husband. I don't want to take on the responsibility of being her caregiver and financial support. I offered to help her find a new place to live, but she refused, insisting that she couldn't afford it and that she was stuck with us. I didn't want to give in, but part of me felt like maybe I was being too harsh. I ended up telling her that she needed to move out within 2 weeks. I didn't want to do it, but I felt like it was the only way to preserve my mental health and my marriage. The situation was just becoming too toxic. It wasn't fair to Eric, who was also frustrated with the lack of boundaries in the house. Well, Mia was furious. She called my parents and told them that I was kicking her out and being cruel. They both called me, saying I should be more understanding and that Mia didn't have anywhere else to go. My mom said that I should just let Mia stay for a while longer and that I shouldn't be so hard on her. My dad said that maybe I should just pay her rent for a couple of months to give her a break until she got back on her feet. I told them that I was not going to keep enabling her and that I needed them to respect my decision. Now, I'm feeling a bit torn. I love my sister, and I don't want her to be homeless, but I also don't want to keep sacrificing my own well-being for her. I've spent so much of my life helping her out, and it's always been a one-sided relationship. I feel like I've done enough. But with my parents on her side, I'm starting to question if I'm being too harsh. So, AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's living expenses and asking her to move out. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's college tuition. I, 29M, have a younger sister, Emily, 21F. We've always had a decent relationship, though we've had our disagreements growing up like most siblings. However, there's been one ongoing issue that I feel is slowly pushing me to the brink of no longer tolerating her antics. I grew up in a fairly middle-class family. Our parents were not rich by any means, but they provided for us and gave us a relatively comfortable life. My parents worked hard, and I always admire them for that. Emily, however, has always been a bit of a spoiled brat. She's the type who always expects things to be handed to her, often with little to no effort on her part. I'm not saying she's lazy, but there's a pattern of her not fully understanding the concept of hard work or responsibility. I'll be upfront. When I graduated college, I was lucky enough to have scholarships and a part-time job that helped cover most of my expenses. I worked hard, balanced my studies with work, and didn't ask my parents for much. It wasn't easy, but I felt proud of what I accomplished. My parents helped when they could, but it wasn't a consistent thing. Fast forward to Emily's time in college. She's always been a high achiever academically, but the problem is she believes she should get everything she wants just because of her grades. She got into a prestigious school on a full scholarship, but she still felt like she should be living the luxury college experience. This included expensive dorms, eating out every day, and making sure her wardrobe was always on point. Our parents didn't have the money for that lifestyle, and they told her she'd have to figure it out on her own. Emily didn't take it well. She started asking me for money. I'm sure many of you can guess what kind of requests those were. At first, it was small things, help with textbooks, transportation costs, and the like. I didn't mind chipping in here and there, though I made sure to be clear with her that this wasn't a regular thing. She was always super grateful and promised she would pay me back once she found a job or got a good internship. But over time, the requests grew more frequent and a lot more demanding. She started asking for money to cover rent, utilities, and even her grocery bills. She claimed her scholarship wasn't enough to cover all her expenses and that our parents were too cheap to help her the way other families help their kids. At one point, she even started asking me to cover some of her social outings, saying things like, "I'm just trying to have fun before I graduate," or "Everyone else in my friend group has parents who help them. Why can't you do the same?" I started to feel like she was taking advantage of me. I'm not rich by any means, and I have my own bills to pay. I've been saving for a house, paying off student loans, and doing my best to live within my means. I tried to set some boundaries and explained that I just couldn't keep bailing her out all the time. I also told her that it wasn't healthy for her to rely so heavily on others to fund her lifestyle. But Emily didn't take it well. She started getting more upset with me, accusing me of being selfish and not supporting her. At one point, she even told me that I was sabotaging her future by not helping her live the life she deserved. That really rubbed me the wrong way. A few months ago, Emily came to me with a huge request. She wanted me to pay for her entire last semester of tuition. She said her scholarship wasn't enough to cover the remaining balance, and she didn't want to take out student loans. She told me that if I helped her pay for it, she'd be able to graduate without worrying about money. I knew she didn't have the kind of financial discipline to manage that kind of responsibility, but she kept saying that I owed it to her because I had it better than she did growing up. I told her no. I explained that I just couldn't afford to help her with that, and that I wasn't comfortable taking on such a huge financial burden for her. I reminded her that our parents were doing the best they could, and that she needed to take responsibility for her own future. Her response was a bombshell. She immediately started texting and calling me, accusing me of ruining her life. She told me that I was just like our parents and that I didn't understand how hard her life was. She said I was selfish and uncaring, and that I should have been more understanding. She even went as far as to say that I wasn't a real brother because a real brother would help her when she needed it most. After all the pressure and the guilt tripping, I still stuck to my decision. I told her she needed to figure it out herself. She's since cut me off, and I haven't heard from her in weeks. My parents have been calling me, telling me I need to apologize and make things right, but I'm honestly at a loss. I feel like I did the right thing by setting boundaries and not enabling her behavior, but the guilt is starting to eat at me. I know she's struggling, but I also know she needs to learn that life isn't just about getting things handed to her. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for her tuition and standing my ground? Should I have given in to her request to be a supportive brother, or was I right to hold firm? AITA for telling my friend she can't stay at my place after she got kicked out by her parents? I, 30M, have a good friend, Sarah, 28F, who I've known since high school. We've always been close, but recently, things have been strained due to a situation that I'm struggling to navigate. I've been going back and forth about whether I'm being unreasonable, and I really need some outside perspective. So, Sarah has always had a bit of a complicated relationship with her parents. From what I know, it's always been a tense dynamic. Her parents have always been strict and, in my opinion, a bit overbearing. Sarah has always been someone who marches to the beat of her own drum, and that's caused a lot of friction between her and her parents. Over the years, there have been many instances where they didn't see eye to eye, but they always seemed to find a way to make up. But lately, things have gotten much worse. To give you a bit of context, Sarah has always struggled with holding down a job. She's tried several different things over the years, but nothing ever really seemed to stick. She's one of those people who tends to bounce around from job to job, often quitting or being let go for various reasons. This has, of course, added to the tension with her parents. They've been very vocal about how they think she should get her life together, stop wasting time, and start focusing on building a career. But Sarah has always been defensive, feeling like they don't understand her and her aspirations. A few months ago, Sarah told me that she had quit her latest job and was thinking of starting a business. She was really excited about it, and I didn't want to rain on her parade, so I supported her decision. I even helped her brainstorm some ideas for her business. I told her that I hoped it worked out for her, but I also reminded her that she should have a backup plan in case it didn't. She didn't take too kindly to that advice, but we didn't fight about it. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, and things started getting really bad between Sarah and her parents. According to her, they were pressuring her to get a real job and stop wasting money on something that wasn't guaranteed to work. At some point, the pressure became too much, and she got into a huge argument with her mom and dad. During the argument, she was apparently told that she was free to leave if she didn't want to follow their rules. Sarah, in her frustration, packed her bags and left their house, saying she didn't need their approval to live her life. She came to me that same day, looking for a place to stay. She explained what happened, and I could see that she was really upset. I've always been there for Sarah, and I knew she had nowhere else to go, so I told her she could stay with me for a while. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, and I thought we could manage. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of living with her, especially given how our relationship had been a bit strained recently, but I also didn't want to leave her in a tough spot. At first, everything seemed fine. Sarah was looking for a new job, working on her business idea, and I tried to be supportive. But over time, the situation became more and more difficult. Sarah has never been the most organized person, and living together only highlighted her lack of responsibility. She was often late on rent, leaving me to cover the difference when I needed to. She'd also leave dishes in the sink for days, forget to take out the trash, and make a mess in the common areas. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed it off, claiming she was busy with her business. On top of that, Sarah started being really intrusive. She'd come into my room unannounced, borrow my things without asking, and use my stuff without even a thank you. I've always been someone who values personal space, and this constant invasion started to wear on me. I spoke to her about it, telling her that while I was happy to help, I needed some boundaries and respect for my space. She got defensive, saying I was being too controlling and that I should just be more supportive of her situation. Things reached a breaking point about 2 weeks ago. Sarah got into another heated argument with her parents over the phone, and after that, she completely shut down. She stopped looking for jobs, didn't work on her business, and seemed to just stay in her room all day, scrolling through social media and complaining about how hard her life was. I understand that she's going through a tough time, but it was becoming really hard to live with her. I found myself constantly picking up after her, covering for her financially, and having to mediate her issues with her parents. It started to feel like I was playing the role of her caretaker rather than her friend. One night, I sat down with her and told her that I didn't think things were working out with her staying at my place. I told her that I couldn't keep supporting her financially and emotionally, especially when she wasn't taking responsibility for her own life. I told her that if she wanted to stay with me, she needed to either contribute more, financially and in terms of chores, or find somewhere else to live. I said I didn't want to be harsh, but that I couldn't continue to let her freeload while I was working hard to keep everything afloat. She completely lost it. She accused me of betraying her, saying I was no better than her parents for kicking her out when she was already at rock bottom. She told me that she had no one else to turn to and that I was supposed to be her friend, not someone who just abandoned her when things got tough. She said she was disappointed in me and that I should be ashamed for not supporting her unconditionally. She ended up packing up her things and leaving, telling me that I was no longer her friend. Now, I'm feeling guilty. I know I set boundaries, and I know that I was right to do so, but I can't shake the feeling that I could have handled the situation better. I'm also worried that I might have permanently damaged our friendship. I still care about Sarah and want to see her succeed, but I don't know if I was too harsh in my approach. So, AITA for telling Sarah she couldn't stay at my place anymore and asking her to take responsibility for her life. Should I have been more patient, or did I do the right thing by setting boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her job. So, a bit of context first. I, 29F, have a best friend, Julia, 30F. We've known each other since high school, and we've always had each other's backs through thick and thin. She's been there for me during some pretty dark times in my life, and I've always tried to return the favor whenever I could. That said, Julia and I have never lived together, but over the years, we've had long talks about it. We've always been supportive of each other's dreams and ambitions, and I thought I understood her better than anyone else. Recently, Julia lost her job. She's been in a bit of a career rut for the past year, and I could tell she was getting stressed about it, but I never expected it to go this far. After she lost her job, she started getting behind on bills, and her landlord gave her a week to pay rent or she'd have to move out. Julia didn't want to ask her parents for help because they're not exactly in a great financial position either, and she doesn't want to feel like a burden. So, she called me, asking if she could move in with me for a few months until she got back on her feet. At first, I was more than willing to help. I know how hard it could be to get back on your feet after a tough job loss. I even told her I could help her out with a few things like paying some bills until she found something stable again. But then, when we started talking logistics, that's when things got complicated. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment with my boyfriend, 32M, Mark. We've been together for 3 years, and things are going really well. We both have pretty demanding jobs, and we like our routine. We've made our space work for us, and while we've talked about moving to a bigger place at some point, right now, we're happy with the way things are. When Julia asked to move in, I started to realize how much this would affect my daily life. I would have to give up my office space, which is where I work from home most days, and share a room with Mark. And since I'd be losing that office, I would have to work at the kitchen table or the couch, something I really don't want to do. Plus, there's the added issue of Mark's feelings. I had to be honest with myself and ask how Mark would feel about having another person living with us, especially since we're not married yet, and I know he values our privacy and quiet time. I talked to Mark about it, and he wasn't thrilled. He's always been kind and supportive of Julia, but he said that having her move in would make things complicated, especially since we don't have the space to give her a separate area of the apartment. I told Julia that while I wanted to help, I wasn't sure I could do so in a way that didn't affect my relationship and my work-life balance. She was upset, but I told her I would help her find other options and even offer to help pay for a short-term rental or help her reach out to local shelters or housing programs that could help in situations like hers. Julia was really hurt by my response. She said I was abandoning her in her time of need and that it felt like I was picking my perfect life over our friendship. She also mentioned that I never really understood what it's like to struggle because I've always had a stable job and haven't had to deal with financial issues like she has. She said that if the roles were reversed, she would have let me move in without hesitation, and that I was being selfish by drawing a line at this. Her words stung, honestly. I've tried to be supportive of her through everything, and I've been there for her during her ups and downs. I've helped her in countless ways before, whether it was with emotional support or financial advice. But the idea of her moving in with us, even temporarily, just didn't sit right with me. It would change the dynamics of my home life, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that, especially with the added tension it would put on my relationship with Mark. Things got even more complicated when Julia started venting to some of our mutual friends about how I was turning my back on her. I was surprised because, aside from my initial reaction, I thought I had been pretty supportive in helping her find alternative solutions. A few of our friends reached out to me privately and said I should just let her move in. They argued that friendships are about helping each other through tough times, and I shouldn't be so concerned with the inconvenience it might cause me. But I've been thinking about this a lot, and while I agree that friendships are about supporting each other, I also think that sometimes boundaries need to be respected. I can't give everything to someone at the expense of my own well-being and my relationship. Now, I'm feeling torn. Julia is still angry at me and hasn't really spoken to me much since I told her no. I've been feeling guilty, but I also feel like I'm entitled to protect my space, my relationship, and my mental health. I've done everything I can to help without completely upending my life, but it feels like that's not enough for her. I've been trying to be there emotionally and financially in the ways I can, but I'm not willing to let her move in if it means jeopardizing my relationship with Mark or my personal well-being. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her job, even though I offered to help in other ways. AITA for telling my parents they're wrong for refusing to meet my adopted child. I, 32M, have been married to my wife, Emma, 30F, for 5 years. We've always wanted children, but for medical reasons, having biological children was not an option for us. After a lot of thought and discussions, we decided to go the adoption route. A year ago, we adopted a little girl, Mia, who is now 4 years old. We've known Mia since she was a baby, and we've kept in touch with her birth mother through the whole process, ensuring that Mia would always know where she came from. The adoption went smoothly, and Mia has fit right into our family, making our home feel complete. While Emma and I were over the moon about Mia joining our family, the situation with my parents has been a lot more complicated. To give you a bit of context, I come from a very traditional family. My parents, both in their 60s, are old school when it comes to a lot of things, and they've always placed a lot of importance on family heritage, bloodlines, and tradition. It's not something I've always agreed with, but it's what I grew up with, so I've learned to manage their expectations to some extent. However, when we told them we were adopting, their reaction was less than enthusiastic. At first, they expressed their concerns about whether it was a good idea to raise a child who wasn't from our bloodline. They worried about the potential difficulties in bonding with a child who wasn't biologically related. I reassured them that Mia was part of our family in every way that mattered, and that was all that counted. They were reluctant, but they seemed to come around to the idea eventually. Things took a turn, though, when we actually brought Mia to visit them for the first time. We thought it would be a special moment, and we hoped that seeing her in person would help them warm up to her. But the visit didn't go as we expected. The first time they met Mia, my parents were distant. They didn't engage with her the way they would with a biological grandchild. My mom, in particular, seemed uncomfortable around her. She kept calling Mia sweetheart or honey, instead of using her name, and she barely made eye contact with her. When Mia ran up to show them a drawing she made, my dad just nodded and didn't even look up from his newspaper. It was clear that they were not really connecting with her. At the time, I try not to make a big deal out of it. I told myself they were just nervous and that it might take time for them to adjust to the idea of having an adopted grandchild. But the behavior didn't improve. On subsequent visits, it was the same. There was a noticeable distance, and they seemed more interested in talking about their own lives than engaging with Mia. It hurt, but I tried to stay patient and understanding, hoping that it would get better. About 3 months ago, things took a turn for the worse. My parents came over to our house for a family gathering, and they refused to acknowledge Mia's presence at all. They didn't speak to her, didn't ask her how she was doing, and didn't even offer her a snack or a drink. It was as if she wasn't even there. Emma and I were both stunned, and it became clear that there was something deeper at play. That evening, after everyone left, Emma and I had a long conversation. We decided that it wasn't right for our daughter to be in an environment where she was being ignored and excluded, especially by her own grandparents. We had a very difficult conversation with my parents the next day. We told them that if they wanted to be a part of Mia's life, they needed to start showing her the same love and attention they would give a biological grandchild. We told them that Mia was part of our family, and if they didn't start treating her like one of their own, they wouldn't be seeing her anymore. My parents were furious. They said we were being unreasonable and that we were pushing them too hard to accept Mia. My mom even said, "I don't know if I can love her the way I would love my own flesh and blood." I was absolutely devastated by her response. I thought my parents were better than that. I thought that, despite their old-fashioned views, they would still be able to see Mia for the beautiful little girl she is. But the more we talked, the more it became clear that they weren't going to change. My dad told me that he didn't want to pretend like Mia was his real granddaughter, and that it wasn't fair to ask him to do so. My mom added that they were too old to change their ways, and that they couldn't just flip a switch and start acting like Mia was their grandchild. At that point, Emma and I made the difficult decision that we would no longer involve them in Mia's life if they couldn't treat her with respect and love. It was heartbreaking, but we couldn't allow Mia to grow up in an environment where she was treated like an outsider. We explained that this wasn't about them not being able to meet Mia's standards. It was about them showing basic kindness, respect, and a willingness to include her in the family. Since then, my parents have tried to reach out a few times, but I've been firm in my stance. I've told them that they need to demonstrate real change if they want to have a relationship with Mia, but they've refused to acknowledge the issue. They continue to send gifts and cards, but they haven't made any effort to fix the deeper issue. Now, my parents are calling me every day, telling me I'm being unfair and that I'm making a huge mistake. They say I'm tearing the family apart and that I should be more understanding of their feelings. They also claim that I'm being too hard on them and that they need time to adjust. But I feel like I've been patient for long enough. I don't want Mia to feel unwanted or like she's not a part of our family, and I'm not willing to let her be treated as less than. I'm starting to feel guilty because I know that this is causing a rift in the family, and I never wanted to put Emma or Mia in a position where they had to choose between me and my parents. But at the same time, I'm not going to let my parents continue to treat my daughter like she doesn't matter. So, AITA for telling my parents they're wrong for refusing to meet my adopted child. AITA for refusing to give my cousin the money she asked for after she cut me out of her life for years. I, 29M, have a cousin, Sarah, 28F, who I've known since we were kids. We were close growing up and spent a lot of time together. However, around the time I turned 20, things started to shift between us. Sarah had always been a bit more rebellious than me, and she started getting into a lot of trouble. She dropped out of college, started partying all the time, and got involved with some questionable people. I always tried to be the voice of reason and offered advice when I could, but she didn't want to hear it. When I was 21, I got my first full-time job out of college. It was a decent job that allowed me to start saving up and thinking about my future. Around that time, Sarah had gotten into some legal trouble. She was arrested for a DUI, and it wasn't her first offense. She was facing some serious consequences and needed financial help to hire a lawyer. I was in a position to help, so I offered her the money to cover part of her legal fees. I did it because I genuinely cared about her, and I thought maybe this would be the turning point for her to get her life together. However, after I gave her the money, things started to change. Sarah became distant. She didn't thank me, and when I reached out to check in on her, she brushed me off. She kept telling me everything was fine and that she was handling the situation on her own. A few months later, she reached out to me and asked for more money for another legal issue. This time, I hesitated. I knew she wasn't really trying to turn things around. She was just using me as a safety net. I told her I couldn't help anymore. I explained that I wanted to see her take responsibility for her actions and make better choices, but I couldn't keep enabling her. That's when she completely cut me out of her life. She stopped talking to me, blocked me on social media, and didn't respond to any of my calls or messages. I was hurt, but I tried to respect her decision. I figured she just needed space and that maybe one day she'd come to her senses and realize that I was just trying to help. For years, I didn't hear from her. During that time, I worked hard to build my career. I moved to a new city, bought my own place, and made a good living for myself. It wasn't easy, but I was proud of what I'd accomplished. Throughout all this, I missed Sarah and hoped that one day we could reconnect. But I wasn't going to chase after someone who didn't want to be a part of my life. Now, fast forward to a few months ago. I got a message from Sarah out of the blue. It was a long message explaining that she had gone through a difficult time, hit rock bottom, and was now trying to get her life together. She apologized for cutting me off and said that she had realized how wrong she was for pushing me away when I was the only one who had ever been there for her. She also admitted that she had made a lot of mistakes and was finally seeking help. I was shocked, but at the same time, I felt relief. Maybe she really was ready to turn things around. She then mentioned that she was in a tight spot financially and was asking if I could lend her some money to help with her living situation. She explained that she had a job now, but she was struggling to pay rent after some unexpected expenses. I took some time to think about it before responding. I wanted to be supportive, but at the same time, I couldn't forget how she had treated me in the past. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how she had treated me after I helped her. I had been there for her when she needed it, but when the tables were turned, she shut me out without a second thought. I wasn't sure I could just forget all of that and offer her financial help again. I decided to reach out to her and have an honest conversation. I told her that I was happy to hear that she was making positive changes in her life, but that I couldn't offer her the financial assistance she was asking for. I explained that I had been burned in the past, and while I wanted to see her succeed, I needed to protect myself as well. I also reminded her that it wasn't just about money. It was about trust, and I wasn't sure if I could trust her again after everything that had happened. I told her that I hoped she understood. Her response was not what I expected. She was furious. She accused me of being selfish and said that I was holding a grudge over things that happened years ago. She told me that I was making her situation worse and that I should be a better family member. She even mentioned that I had no problem helping other people, so why was I treating her differently? She said that family should always support each other, no matter what. After reading her message, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to help her because she was family, and I knew she had been through a lot. But another part of me felt like I was being asked to ignore my own boundaries and let her walk all over me again. I'd already helped her twice in the past, and both times it had led to nothing but hurt feelings and broken trust. I've been really torn about whether or not I made the right decision. On the one hand, I want to be supportive of my family, but on the other hand, I feel like I'm constantly being taken advantage of. It's not like I'm rich or have unlimited resources. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I don't want to just give away my hard-earned money to someone who might not appreciate it. So, AITA for refusing to give my cousin the money she asked for after everything that happened in the past? Or should I have helped her out like she wanted? AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she constantly asks me for help and never pays it back? I, 30M, have a friend, Jess, 29F, who I've known for over 10 years. We met in college and became close pretty quickly. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs like any friendship, but generally, we've been there for each other. However, things have started to get complicated recently, and I'm starting to question if I'm being unreasonable. Jess has always had a bit of a chaotic life. She tends to live in the moment, and while that can be fun, It also means she doesn't always plan ahead. She doesn't really have a stable job, and she's had trouble with finances for as long as I've known her. I'm not saying she's lazy or anything like that. She's just not great at managing money, and she's always been very open about the fact that she struggles with it. I've always been there to help her when I can. In the past, I've lent her money a few times when she's been in a tough spot, but here's the thing. She never pays it back. The first couple of times, I didn't mind too much. I know that life can be unpredictable, and I thought she just needed a little help getting back on her feet. But after it happened a third time, I started to get frustrated. She promised she'd pay me back each time, but it never happened. The amount wasn't huge each time, but it added up, and I started to feel like I was being taken advantage of. I decided to have a conversation with her about it. I told her that I valued our friendship, but I couldn't keep lending her money if she wasn't going to pay it back. She apologized, and I thought that would be the end of it. Unfortunately, it wasn't. A few months ago, Jess called me in a panic. She had gotten into some financial trouble again and needed money to cover rent. I told her I couldn't lend her anything this time. I explained that I had helped her before, and it hadn't worked out well. I also said that I had my own financial goals, and I couldn't keep putting myself at risk for her. She seemed disappointed, but accepted it. However, I noticed that she stopped talking to me as much after that. It wasn't like she was rude or anything, but the usual daily texts and hangouts dwindled. A few weeks later, Jess came to me with a new emergency. This time, she had a medical bill that she couldn't pay. She said she would be fine, but it was an urgent situation, and she didn't have anyone else to turn to. She asked me to lend her $1,000. I hesitated, but she insisted she would pay me back as soon as she could. I told her I couldn't help, not just because I wasn't sure I could trust her to pay me back, but also because I had other financial priorities. I thought I was being pretty reasonable. But once again, Jess didn't take it well. She started texting me constantly, explaining how she couldn't believe I wasn't there for her, how I had helped her in the past, but now that things were really bad, I was turning my back on her. She even made it sound like I was abandoning her during a crisis. I didn't give in, but made me feel guilty. Eventually, I had to cut off communication for a bit because it was becoming overwhelming. I didn't want to be the villain, but at the same time, I couldn't keep sacrificing my own financial well-being just to help her out. Fast forward a few months. Jess came back into my life, but this time, she had a different tone. She was much more apologetic, saying she understood why I couldn't help her and that she was working on getting her life together. She asked if we could just hang out and talk, as she had been feeling really lonely. I agreed because I truly missed the good times we used to have. We met up, had a nice conversation, and she seemed like she was in a better place emotionally. It was refreshing, and I felt like maybe she was turning a corner. However, just last week, she messaged me again, this time asking for a smaller amount of money, about $200, to help cover some bills. She said that things were still tight and that she didn't want to ask anyone else, but I was her last hope. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to be cold, but I also didn't want to keep enabling her. I told her that I couldn't lend her money again and that I had been clear about how I felt before. She didn't take it well, of course, and started texting me about how she felt betrayed by my decision. I know she has issues with money management, and I sympathize with her, but it feels like she only reaches out to me when she needs something, and it's always the same cycle. I've tried to be a good friend and have helped her when I could, but it's becoming clear that this is a pattern. I'm not expecting her to be perfect, but I'm at a point where I can't keep bailing her out, especially when she's not showing any signs of learning how to handle her finances better. I've talked to a few friends about this, and while some agree that I'm being reasonable, others think I'm being too harsh. They say I should be there for her, especially because she has no one else to turn to. But I feel like if I keep helping her, I'll just be enabling her behavior, and I don't want to be in that position anymore. I don't want to lose the friendship, but I also need to set boundaries for my own sake. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend money again after everything that happened? Or should I just suck it up and help her out, even if I don't think she'll ever change her habits? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to pay for my brother's medical bills after he chose to go against my advice. I 29F, have an older brother, Alex, 32M, who has always been a bit reckless. Growing up, he was the kind of person who would jump into things without thinking them through, whether it was sports, relationships, or life choices. I've always been the more cautious one, the one who weighs the risks and makes sure everything is planned out. I've often found myself playing the role of the responsible one in the family, especially when it comes to Alex. A few months ago, Alex came to me with some pretty alarming news. He had been experiencing some pain in his back for a while, and after a few doctor visits, they found a large mass near his spine. It was diagnosed as a herniated disc that required surgery to prevent it from worsening, and the doctors strongly recommended that he go ahead with the procedure as soon as possible. Given the severity of his condition, it was clear that delaying the surgery could lead to permanent damage. Here's where things took a turn. Despite the medical advice, Alex was hesitant about going under the knife. He was always more of a let's try alternative methods kind of person, and he started researching ways to cure his herniated disc without surgery. He found a group online that swore by holistic treatments, including acupuncture, chiropractic care, and a range of dietary supplements. While I'm not against alternative medicine when it's used alongside conventional treatments, I was seriously concerned when I saw how fervently Alex was following these unproven methods. I did everything I could to talk him out of it. I tried to explain the risks of avoiding the surgery, emphasizing that his condition could worsen to the point where he'd be permanently disabled. I even went so far as to accompany him to a follow-up appointment with his surgeon, where the doctor was clear and direct about the potential consequences of delaying surgery. Despite all of this, Alex remained stubborn. He told me he had done his research and believed the surgery was unnecessary, even though the doctor was advising him against waiting too long. As much as I disagreed with his decision, I respected his autonomy. He's an adult, after all, and I knew I couldn't force him to go through with the surgery. However, I made it very clear that I wouldn't be financially supporting any alternative treatments, especially if they led to more serious issues down the line. I told him that if he chose to avoid surgery and things went south, he would have to take full responsibility for the financial consequences. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, Alex's condition got worse. He started having trouble walking and was in constant pain. His doctor insisted that he needed surgery immediately, and this time, Alex had no choice but to agree. The surgery was successful, but the recovery was tough, and it ended up being more expensive than anticipated. On top of the surgery costs, he had a number of follow-up visits and physical therapy sessions that quickly piled up. I knew he was in a tough spot financially, and I felt bad for him. But here's the thing. Alex came to me, asking for help with the medical bills. He said he couldn't afford the mounting costs, and he needed me to chip in. I was floored. After everything, I just couldn't believe he was asking for my help after he'd gone against my advice and ignored the clear warnings from his doctors. I told him that I wasn't going to pay for his medical bills. I reminded him that I had been clear about my stance when he chose to delay surgery and try alternative treatments. I told him that I couldn't support him financially after he'd made such a risky, irresponsible decision. Alex was furious. He called me heartless and said that I was turning my back on him when he needed me most. He said that I was being too judgmental and that family should support each other, no matter what. He accused me of being unsympathetic and said I didn't care about him. I told him that I cared deeply about him, which was why I had tried so hard to make him see reason before his condition worsened. But I also told him that I couldn't justify financially enabling his decisions when he had ignored expert advice and put himself in this situation. Our parents are now involved, and they're pressuring me to help Alex. They keep telling me that I'm being cruel by not offering financial support, especially given that he's recovering from a major surgery. They also keep pointing out that he's always been a bit reckless and that I should do the right thing and help him out of this mess. But I'm still firm in my decision. I don't think I should pay for his mistakes, and I feel like this could send the wrong message, that he can disregard good advice and make irresponsible decisions, and then expect others to clean up the mess. I've been feeling a lot of guilt about this situation, especially because my parents have made me feel like I'm the villain in this scenario. I've also noticed that Alex is upset with me and hasn't reached out for anything since I declined to help with his bills. I know he's struggling, but at the same time, I feel like my decision was justified. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to pay for my brother's medical bills after he chose to go against my advice and delay surgery. AITA for kicking my brother out after he repeatedly disrespected my boundaries. Even though I offered him multiple chances, I, 30M, have a younger brother, Alex, 25M, and we've had a complicated relationship over the years. Growing up, we were close, but as we got older, things started to shift. Alex has always had a bit of a free-spirit personality, and while I admire his adventurous side, he's also become somewhat irresponsible in recent years. He's bounced between jobs, has struggled with his finances, and has a tendency to make decisions without thinking them through. For the past few years, I've tried to help him whenever I could, but lately, I've reached my limit. About 6 months ago, Alex came to me with a problem. He had just lost yet another job and was behind on rent for the third time in a row. He asked if he could move in with me for a few months while he got back on his feet. I thought about it for a while and agreed, with some ground rules in place. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and I'm lucky enough to have a good-paying job in tech, which gives me a decent amount of flexibility. I told Alex that if he was going to stay with me, he would need to pitch in financially and help out with chores. I made it clear that I wasn't going to be his personal safety net forever. He said he understood and promised that he would take things seriously. At first, things seemed okay. He paid a share of the rent and helped with the dishes and basic cleaning. However, as time went on, it became clear that he wasn't following through on the promises he'd made. He'd show up late to dinner, leave his dirty clothes around the house, and when I'd ask him to clean up after himself, he'd either make excuses or do a half-hearted job. I don't mind doing my part of the housework, but it started to feel like I was doing everything while he just coasted by. The biggest issue came when I noticed that he was still spending money on things he didn't need. I was fine with the occasional night out or grabbing coffee with friends, but I found out he had bought a brand new gaming system, some expensive clothes, and even went on a weekend trip to a concert, all while telling me that he was broke and couldn't contribute more to the rent. It frustrated me because I had made it clear that his priority should be getting back on his feet, and I had even offered to help him find more stable work if he needed it. But instead, he seemed more focused on having fun and keeping up with his friends rather than actually addressing his financial situation. I decided to have a conversation with him about it. I calmly pointed out that he needed to start taking his situation more seriously. I reminded him of our agreement when he moved in and that he wasn't respecting the rules we'd set. I told him that if he didn't start paying more attention to his finances and helping out more around the apartment, I would have to reconsider the arrangement. At first, he seemed apologetic and promised to do better. I really wanted to believe him, but it didn't take long for things to fall back into the same patterns. The next issue came when Alex started bringing his friends over, sometimes without even asking me. I'm not the type of person to mind the occasional guest, but it became an almost weekly occurrence. His friends would come over, play loud music, and hang out in the living room until late at night. I work early mornings, and the noise and constant disruptions were making it hard for me to get enough sleep. I asked him a few times to let me know when he was planning to have people over so I could adjust my schedule, but he would either forget or simply ignore my requests. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells in my own home. At this point, I was getting really fed up. My work was being affected by the lack of sleep, and I started to feel like I couldn't even relax in my own space. I had always been the responsible one in the family, and I was starting to feel like Alex was taking advantage of my kindness. We had another conversation, and this time, I was more direct. I told him that I couldn't keep living like this, and that he needed to start respecting my boundaries. I told him that if he didn't make significant changes, I would have to ask him to leave. Alex's reaction was exactly what I expected. He became defensive and accused me of being too hard on him. He said that I was overreacting and that he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He pointed out that I had offered to help him in the past and that he was just trying to enjoy his life. But I reminded him that enjoying life didn't mean disregarding the commitments he had made to me and ignoring my needs. I told him that I wasn't asking for much, just that he contribute financially, respect my space, and follow through on his promises. At this point, I realized that nothing was going to change. He wasn't listening, and the more I tried to talk to him, the more he resisted. I had already given him several chances, but nothing seemed to get through to him. I finally made the decision to ask him to leave. I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had no choice. I'd been patient. I tried to be understanding, but my own well-being was starting to suffer. I sat him down one last time and told him that he needed to find a new place to stay within the next week. I offered to help him with the process and gave him resources for finding affordable rentals, but I made it clear that he couldn't stay with me anymore. He was furious. He called me selfish, accused me of not caring about him, and said that I was throwing him out when he was at his lowest point. I tried to explain that I wasn't kicking him out because I didn't care, but because I couldn't keep enabling his behavior. I told him that he was an adult now, and he needed to learn to take responsibility for his actions. Since then, things have been awkward between us. I feel guilty, but at the same time, I know I did the right thing. He's since found a new place to stay, and while I haven't heard much from him, I know he's upset. I've had mixed opinions from our family as well. Our parents are split. My mom thinks I should have been more patient, but my dad says I did what I had to do for my own peace of mind. So, AITA for kicking my brother out after he repeatedly disrespected my boundaries. Even though I offered him multiple chances, AITA for telling my friend she can't bring her new boyfriend around anymore after he made me uncomfortable. I, 27F, have a friend, Emma, 26F, who I've known since college. We've always been close, and over the years, we've supported each other through a lot of life changes. Recently, though, things have gotten complicated, and I'm feeling a bit conflicted about my actions. So, here's the situation. Emma recently started dating a guy, Jason, 28M. From the very beginning, she was all in. She's a pretty open person, and she loves sharing details about her relationships, so I knew a lot about Jason before I even met him. She described him as a good guy, someone who had his life together and shared her values. I was happy for her, and I wanted to support her in this new chapter. But when I finally met Jason, things took a turn I wasn't expecting. It started at a group gathering at my place. I invited Emma and a few other close friends over for a casual evening, dinner, drinks, and catching up. Emma brought Jason along, and everything seemed fine at first. He was charming, friendly, and polite, but there were a few things that raised red flags for me as the night went on. The first thing that stood out was how Jason kept making comments about my appearance. I might want to take compliments lightly, but Jason's remarks started to feel a little too personal for my liking. He'd say things like, "Wow, you're looking really good tonight. I can't believe how much weight you've lost," or "You should totally be a model. Have you ever thought about it?" At first, I thought it was just awkward small talk, but after a while, I started feeling a little uncomfortable. It wasn't just the compliments that made me uneasy. Jason kept finding ways to touch me, whether it was a casual hand on my shoulder, brushing against me when he was passing by, or even lingering a bit too long when he gave me a hug. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was overreacting or that he was just a very touchy person, but it started to feel like a pattern. Every time I tried to step away or subtly move, he would move closer, almost as if he didn't get the social cues that I wasn't interested in his attention. At one point, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. As I was walking down the hall, I felt Jason right behind me. When I turned around, he was just a few feet away, standing too close for comfort. He said something like, "I didn't want you to think I was ignoring you." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and hurried into the bathroom. When I came back, I tried to focus on the conversation with my other friends, but Jason kept interrupting, making comments, and acting a little too familiar. Emma didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. She was busy talking about how excited she was about their future together, and I didn't want to ruin her excitement by confronting her about her boyfriend behavior. So, I kept my mouth shut and tried to stay as far away from Jason as possible for the rest of the night. Things didn't improve the next few times I saw him. Every time we got together as a group, Jason seemed to zero in on me, making me the target of his uncomfortable compliments and lingering touches. At one point, we were at a bar, and while I was standing at the counter ordering a drink, I felt his hand on my back. It wasn't a casual brush. It was an extended, deliberate touch. I turned around quickly and asked, "What's up?" in a tone I hoped would make him realize his behavior was inappropriate. He just smiled and said, "You're just so easy to talk to. I feel comfortable around you." It felt like he was trying to make excuses for his actions, and it made me feel worse. Finally, I decided I had to say something. I didn't want to make a big scene or cause drama, but I needed to set a boundary. I called Emma the next day and asked her if we could talk privately. When we met up, I explained that I didn't feel comfortable around Jason, especially with the way he was acting toward me. I told her that while I understood he might not mean anything by it, his behavior, touching me without permission and making overly personal comments, was making me feel really uneasy. I stressed that I wasn't accusing him of anything malicious, but I just didn't want him around me anymore unless he could respect my space and boundaries. Emma didn't take it well. She immediately became defensive and said, "Are you sure you're not overreacting? Jason's just friendly, and you know how he is with everyone." She tried to downplay my feelings and said it was just his personality and that I should try to get along with him better. She also said that I was being unfair by expecting her to choose between me and him. She told me that if I couldn't accept him, maybe we just shouldn't hang out anymore. I was taken aback by her response. I told her that it wasn't about choosing between me and him. It was about my comfort level and boundaries. I said that if she wanted to continue seeing him, that was her choice, but I couldn't keep being around him in the same way. I asked her to consider how his actions were making me feel and how she would feel if the roles were reversed. It wasn't about jealousy or trying to control her. It was about my own personal space and comfort. Emma seemed hurt but also irritated. She said, "You're blowing this out of proportion. You're making it sound like Jason is some kind of creep, and that's not fair to him." She also accused me of trying to ruin her relationship by making her choose between me and Jason. She ended the conversation by saying that she needed some time to think about everything. We haven't spoken much since then. Emma hasn't reached out, and I've been feeling conflicted. I know I did the right thing by standing up for myself, but I can't help but feel guilty for potentially ruining our friendship. I understand that she's in love and probably doesn't want to see her boyfriend in a negative light, but I feel like my boundaries should have been respected. So, AITA for telling my friend she couldn't bring her boyfriend around anymore after he made me uncomfortable? Should I have tried to be more patient or understanding? Or did I do the right thing by setting clear boundaries? AITA for telling my brother I won't attend his family gatherings anymore after he kept making fun of my lifestyle. I, 33M, have a younger brother, Adam, 28M, who I've always been close with despite the age gap. Growing up, we were like best friends, doing everything together, having each other's backs and sharing secrets. But as we got older, our lives took different paths, and we started to grow apart in ways that I never really expected. This situation, however, has pushed me to a breaking point, and I'm starting to question if I'm in the wrong for finally standing up for myself. I'm a single guy with a rather unconventional lifestyle, at least by my family standards. I've never been into the typical 9-to-5 grind. I work as a freelance writer and photographer, which means my schedule is flexible and I have the freedom to travel and take time off whenever I want. I know it's not the most stable career choice, but I enjoy the work and it allows me to live in a way that makes me happy. I live in a small apartment in the city and my life is simple. No family, no partner, just me, my work, and my hobbies. On the other hand, Adam has always lived a more traditional life. He went to university, got a stable job in finance, married his college sweetheart, and they have 2 kids now. His life is very structured, and he's always had very strong opinions about what success looks like. For a long time, he's been very vocal about his views on life, and while we've had our differences, I've always respected his choices. I never judged him for how he lived, even though it was different from me. But over the last couple of years, things have started to change. Adam has started making comments about my lifestyle, especially when we're at family gatherings. It started small, things like joking about how I must have a lot of free time since I don't work a regular job, or how I probably don't need to worry about paying bills on time because I don't have a family to support. At first, I shrugged it off as harmless teasing, but it kept happening and it got worse. One Thanksgiving, Adam made a comment about how I don't have a real career and how I probably just take pictures of things and call it work. It was said in front of the whole family, and everyone laughed. I was caught off guard, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I just stayed quiet. But inside, I felt humiliated. This wasn't the first time he had said something like this, but this time, it hit me harder. It wasn't just about the comment itself. It was the fact that it was always in front of the family, like he was trying to make me look inferior. I've been doing freelance work for years, and I've built a successful career doing something I'm passionate about. The idea that he thought it was all a joke really stung. The comments started to escalate. At another family dinner, Adam asked me if I ever planned to get a real job and settle down. He followed up with, "You can't just keep living like this forever. At some point, you'll have to grow up." Again, this was said in front of my parents and his wife, and I felt like I was being put on display for everyone to judge. His words felt like an attack on my character and my choices. But I didn't say anything. I just excused myself from the table, went outside to cool off, and try not to let it bother me. The last straw for me came a few weeks ago. It was Christmas Eve, and the family was having dinner at Adam's house. I hadn't been feeling well, so I almost didn't go, but I decided to push through and attend. While we were talking about the new year and everyone's resolutions, Adam once again started with his comments. He asked me if I was finally planning on getting serious about life, and then made a joke about how some of us actually have responsibilities as he glanced over at his wife and kids. I felt like he was intentionally trying to belittle my choices. At this point, I'd had enough. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and told him that I didn't appreciate his comments anymore. I told him that I was happy with my life, and that just because it didn't look like his didn't mean it was any less valid. I also told him that if he couldn't respect my choices and my career, I wasn't going to continue attending these family gatherings where he kept making me feel like I was a failure. Everyone went silent. Adam looked taken aback and started to apologize, but it was clear he was more upset that I had stood up to him than actually understanding why I was upset. My parents looked uncomfortable, but they didn't intervene, and after a few awkward minutes, I left. I sent a message to the family group chat, letting them know that I wasn't coming to any more family events as long as Adam kept making comments like that. I also told them I felt disrespected, and I wasn't going to tolerate it anymore. Since then, I haven't heard much from anyone. Adam sent me a message, saying he didn't mean to hurt my feelings and that I was being too sensitive. He also said that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to help me by giving advice. He mentioned that some people just don't understand how to live a real, fulfilling life, which felt like another jab at me. I haven't responded, and I've been keeping my distance from the family. My parents called me the other day and asked if I was really done with the family gatherings. I told them that until Adam could stop belittling me, I wouldn't be attending. My mom said she understood, but my dad seemed disappointed, like I was causing drama over something minor. Adam, however, has told a few relatives that I'm being unreasonable and that I'm holding a grudge. He insists that I'm taking his comments too seriously and that I should just toughen up. I've been feeling conflicted because part of me thinks maybe I am overreacting, but another part of me feels like I'm finally standing up for myself after years of putting up with his comments. I'm proud of the life I've built, and I don't think it's wrong to want respect for that. So, AITA for telling my brother I won't attend any more family gatherings as long as he keeps making fun of my lifestyle. Should I just let it go and return to the same old routine? AITA for telling my best friend she can't stay with me after a breakup. I, 28F, have a best friend, Katie, 29F, who I've known for over a decade. We met in college and have been inseparable ever since. We've always been there for each other through thick and thin, supporting each other through breakups, job changes, family issues, and everything in between. I've always considered her family, and we've been through so much together that I've never thought twice about helping her out in tough situations. Katie recently went through a very painful breakup with her long-term boyfriend, Jake. They'd been together for 4 years, and it seemed like they were on the path to getting engaged. Everyone thought they were a perfect couple. But then, about 2 months ago, Jake ended the relationship out of nowhere, saying that he didn't feel the same way anymore and that he needed time to figure out what he wanted in life. Katie was devastated. And to be honest, I wasn't surprised when she came to me asking if she could stay with me for a while she figured things out. I've always been the type of person who loves to help and provide support. So I immediately said yes. My apartment isn't huge, but it's a two-bedroom place, and I thought it would be nice to have her stay with me until she could get back on her feet. I assumed it would be a temporary thing, a few weeks at most, but I could tell from the start that Katie wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. The first few weeks were fine. She was understandably sad and spent a lot of time on the couch watching Netflix and talking to friends about the breakup. I tried to be there for her as much as I could. I'd cook dinner, offer advice, and make sure she felt as comfortable as possible. But as time went on, I started to notice things that began to bother me. For one, Katie wasn't doing much to help around the apartment. I get that she was going through a lot emotionally, but after a few weeks, it became clear that she wasn't even attempting to contribute in any meaningful way. She would leave her dirty dishes in the sink for days, take up all the space on the couch, and generally made herself at home without thinking about how much space she was taking up in my life. I would have to remind her multiple times to help out with things like taking out the trash or cleaning up after herself. And even then, it was a struggle. The biggest issue, however, was how much her presence started to affect my relationship with my boyfriend, Mike, 30M. Mike and I have been dating for about a year, and things have been going really well. But ever since Katie moved in, he's been feeling uncomfortable in my own apartment. He and Katie don't get along that well. It's not that they dislike each other, but their personalities just don't mesh. Mike is more introverted and likes to have his own space, while Katie is very social and has a loud, boisterous personality. She often talks over him or makes comments that make him feel like an outsider in our own home. There have been several occasions where Mike has come over to my place after work, only to find Katie sprawled out on the couch with her friends, laughing and talking loudly. Mike would sit quietly on the other side of the room, not really participating in the conversation, while Katie and her friends would completely dominate the evening. It put a strain on my relationship with Mike because I could see how uncomfortable he was, but I didn't want to hurt Katie's feelings by asking her to leave. I tried to talk to Katie about it gently. I told her that while I was happy to have her here and wanted to support her, I also needed her to respect the space and the people in it. I explained that I needed to find a balance between helping her and maintaining my relationship with Mike. She got defensive and said I was being unsupportive and that she wasn't asking for much, just a place to stay while she dealt with the breakup. She also pointed out that she had no other options and was basically homeless without my help. A few weeks after that conversation, things started to escalate. Katie started bringing over even more of her belongings, clothes, shoes, books, and before long, my second bedroom, which I had originally planned to use as an office, became completely filled with her stuff. She started talking about how she wasn't sure when she'd be ready to move out and that she felt like she needed more time. She wasn't actively looking for a new place to live and seemed content just staying at my apartment indefinitely. That's when I decided I needed to set a boundary. I told Katie that while I wanted to be there for her, I couldn't continue to let her stay indefinitely. I gave her a timeline of 2 months to find a new place to stay. I told her that after those 2 months, I needed my space back, and I needed her to respect that. I didn't think it was fair to let her stay indefinitely, especially when she wasn't making any effort to take responsibility for herself or her situation. Katie was livid. She accused me of being cold-hearted and selfish, saying that I was kicking her out when she needed me most. She cried and said that she had nowhere else to go and that I was her only friend left. I felt awful hearing that, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't continue to let my own life and relationship be put on hold indefinitely for her sake. My parents got involved shortly after. Katie told them what was going on, and they called me, saying that I should be more understanding. They said that Katie needed me right now and that I shouldn't abandon her when she was going through such a tough time. They argued that I should let her stay as long as she needed, and that it was my responsibility as her best friend to support her fully. My mom even said that I shouldn't prioritize my boyfriend over my best friend, and that family and friends should come first. I tried to explain my point of view, but they were very insistent that I was being unreasonable. Now I'm feeling guilty. I love Katie, and I understand that she's going through a tough time, but I can't ignore the toll it's taking on me. I feel like I've been more than accommodating, but I'm also worried that my boundaries will lead to her cutting me out of her life entirely. She's already stopped talking to me for the last couple of days, and I'm starting to wonder if I've made a huge mistake. So, AITA for telling my best friend she can't stay with me after her breakup. AITA for telling my best friend she's not welcome at my house after she went behind my back and borrowed money from my parents without asking me. So, I, 28F, have a best friend, Sarah, 29F, who I've known since high school. We've always been incredibly close, and I've always considered her more like a sister than a friend. Throughout the years, I've supported her through a lot, whether it was relationship drama, family issues, or financial problems. She's always been a bit of a spender and tends to live beyond her means, but I've never judged her for it. She's made it clear many times that she's not good with money, and I've helped her out on a few occasions when things got tough. Here's where things get tricky. Sarah recently lost her job due to budget cuts at her company. I wasn't too worried about her at first because she has always managed to land new jobs fairly quickly. However, after about a month of searching, she was still unemployed. I started noticing that she was getting stressed about her finances, and I offered her some advice on managing her budget while she looked for a new job. I even offered to help her with some of her bills until she got back on her feet, but she turned me down, saying she didn't want to feel like a burden. At that point, I thought she was being a little prideful, but respected her wishes. I figured she'd manage somehow. Then, about a week later, Sarah called me up, and she sounded upset. She told me that she was behind on her rent and didn't know how she was going to make it through the next month. I offered again to help her out with the rent or cover some of her bills temporarily, but she insisted that she didn't want to take money from me. I respected her decision, but I still felt bad for her situation. A few days later, my parents, who live nearby, called me. They were concerned about Sarah and told me that they had lent her money to cover her rent for the next few months. I was shocked. My parents have always been kind and generous, but I hadn't known they were even aware of Sarah's situation. Apparently, she had gone to them for help without telling me, and they had agreed to lend her the money without asking for my opinion or informing me beforehand. I wasn't exactly angry with my parents, but I felt blindsided. I had always been the one Sarah turned to for support, and the fact that she went behind my back and went to my parents for money, without even mentioning it to me, felt like a betrayal. I'm the one who's always been there for her, so it really stung that she'd go to my parents, who don't have as much disposable income as I do, instead of asking me. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't want to burden me with her financial problems, but she knew that my parents would help her out, especially since they were always so kind to her. I was really hurt by this, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I understand that she was in a tough spot, but I had offered to help her, and I felt like she didn't trust me enough to take me up on that offer. Instead, she went behind my back and asked my parents, who don't always have extra money lying around. My parents weren't mad at me about the situation, but I felt like I was being excluded from the decision-making process. They just saw Sarah as someone in need, and of course, they wanted to help her, but I felt completely left out of the loop. After our conversation, things were awkward between me and Sarah. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't mean to hurt me, and that she was just trying to get by. She said that she didn't want to make me feel obligated, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she had deliberately excluded me from the process because she didn't want to deal with the tension between us. The thing is, I don't have a problem with helping my friends, but I want to be asked and included in the conversation. I didn't feel like Sarah respected me enough to do that. Now, here's where I might be the asshole. After the whole situation with my parents, I started feeling like I couldn't trust Sarah anymore. I've always been the one who's helped her, but she didn't come to me when she needed help this time. She went to my parents, and that felt like a serious betrayal. I made the decision to set some clear boundaries. I told her that, for the time being, I didn't want her to come over to my house anymore. I explained that I needed space to process my feelings, and I couldn't have her around until I was able to sort things out. I also told her that if she ever needed help in the future, she should come to me first, not my parents. Sarah was understandably upset. She said she felt like I was punishing her for doing what she thought was best in a difficult situation. She said she never meant to hurt me and that she just didn't want to burden me with her financial problems. She also pointed out that she never asked me for money directly because she didn't want to put me in a tough position. I understood her point, but I felt like she had crossed a line by asking my parents for help without even telling me. It felt like she didn't value our friendship as much as I valued it. I tried to explain that I was hurt because she had gone behind my back, and that it wasn't about the money, but about the lack of trust and communication. I told her that if she had just come to me, we could have worked something out, but it felt like she was keeping me out of the loop, and that's what really upset me. She's now saying that I'm being overly dramatic, and that I should just let it go and move on. She says she's sorry, but I've made it clear that I need space. I've been ignoring her texts and calls because I don't know how to move forward with our friendship. I've been going back and forth on whether I'm overreacting. I know she was in a tough spot, but I can't help but feel like my boundaries were disrespected, and that trust has been broken. I've helped her out so many times, and I feel like I deserve to be included in this decision. My parents are still lending her money, and I've made it clear that I'm not mad at them, but it's hard to let go of the fact that Sarah went behind my back. So, AITA for telling my best friend she's not welcome at my house after she went behind my back and borrowed money from my parents without asking me. AITA for telling my sister that I won't attend her graduation because of the way she treated me during our childhood. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Lily, 24F. Growing up, we had a pretty complicated relationship. Our parents were always focused on keeping up appearances, and as the older child, I often felt like I was responsible for everything in our household, while Lily seemed to get a lot of the attention. She was the perfect child in our parents' eyes, charming, confident, and generally getting away with whatever she wanted. I, on the other hand, was the problem child. I was always seen as difficult, rebellious, and was often compared to Lily in a way that felt like I couldn't measure up. When we were younger, Lily and I fought constantly. She was mean to me, and I think part of that stemmed from her feeling like she had to prove herself to our parents, especially since they always praised her for being so sweet and well-behaved. I, on the other hand, felt like I could never do anything right, no matter how hard I tried. Our parents were often too busy with their work or social obligations to notice the way Lily treated me. She would take my things without asking, and if I ever said anything about it, she'd cry to our parents and accuse me of being a bully. I remember getting in trouble several times for defending myself when she crossed a line, and it only made things worse. As we got older, things didn't improve. I went off to college, and while I tried to maintain a relationship with Lily, I started to distance myself from her. I just couldn't handle the constant comparisons anymore, and every time I tried to talk to her about it, I felt like she never understood where I was coming from. She'd brush me off, saying I was overreacting, or worse, accuse me of being jealous of her. It was always a one-sided relationship, where she was always in the right, and I was the one who had to apologize. Fast forward to a few months ago, and Lily is graduating from college. Our parents are thrilled, of course, and they've been planning a big celebration for her. She's always been the golden child in the family, so everyone has been hyping up this graduation. At first, I was happy for her. Graduating from college is a huge milestone, and I wanted to support her. But as the date got closer, old feelings started resurfacing, and I realized that I was struggling with the idea of attending her graduation at all. I've been working hard to build my own career in life, and while I'm not where I want to be yet, I've made significant progress. But every time I spoke to my parents or Lily about it, they would always bring up how much better Lily was doing than me. They'd say things like, "Lily's so successful. She's going to be such a great asset to the family business." Or, "Lily's got everything figured out, unlike you." I never asked for any of these comparisons, but they were constant. Even when I was home for the holidays, it was always about how amazing Lily was and how much potential she had, while I was left to deal with the fact that my achievements were downplayed or ignored. As Lily's graduation date drew nearer, I began to feel like there was no way I could go to the ceremony and pretend to be happy for her. The emotional toll of years of comparison and her constant superiority complex just weighed too heavily on me. I started thinking about how many times I had tried to bond with her, to talk about how I felt growing up, and how she had always dismissed my feelings or turned them into a joke. I felt like the only time I was ever good enough for her was when I was serving her in some way, whether it was helping her with a project or doing something for her that benefited her directly. But when I needed something, when I needed her to listen or be there for me, it was always a different story. I tried talking to Lily about my feelings before her graduation. I told her that I was struggling with attending because of how she had treated me in the past. I explained that I tried to move past it, but every time I was around her, I felt like I was still that child who was constantly overlooked, belittled, or ignored. I said that while I didn't want to ruin her special day, I didn't feel like I could celebrate it with her when I still carried all this resentment. I asked her if we could have a conversation about our past and maybe start working through some of the issues we had. Lily's response was, to put it bluntly, dismissive. She told me I was being ridiculous and that no one cared about the past anymore. She told me that I should just get over it because it was her day and I should be there to support her, no matter what happened in the past. She accused me of being selfish, saying that I was trying to steal her spotlight by making her graduation about me and my issues. She also said something that really stung. She said, I've worked so hard to get where I am, and I don't have time for people who want to hold grudges. Maybe you should try focusing on your own life instead of dragging up old drama. After that conversation, I was left feeling even more conflicted. I knew that Lily wasn't going to take responsibility for her part in our strained relationship, and I realized that I would never get the validation or understanding I was looking for from her. I also knew that attending her graduation would mean putting on a facade for the sake of everyone else, and I just couldn't do it. I decided not to go. I called my parents to explain my decision. I told them I didn't feel like I could attend, and I needed to take a step back from the family dynamic. I tried to be as calm and clear as possible, explaining that it wasn't about not supporting Lily, but rather that I couldn't continue to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. My parents were furious. They accused me of being selfish and hurting Lily on a day that was supposed to be about her accomplishments. They told me that I was making everything about myself and that I was ruining the family by not being there for my sister. Since then, my family hasn't spoken to me much. My parents have made it clear that they are upset, and Lily has texted me a few times, accusing me of being a horrible sister and a burden on the family. I've been feeling guilty about my decision, but at the same time, I feel like I had no choice. I've spent years trying to maintain a relationship with Lily, but it's always been on her terms, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So, AITA for telling my sister that I won't attend her graduation because of the way she treated me during our childhood? Should I have put my feelings aside for the sake of family? Or did I do the right thing by standing up for myself and setting boundaries? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.